So I wanted to go over some basics of cross stitching. So I have some basic supplies here. I have a piece of Aida, which is the type of fabric that you cross stitch on. It is a gridded fabric that specifically has holes made for cross stitching. I have some embroidery thread here. This is 6-strand embroidery thread. I have a needle threader, and some scissors. So to get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about Aida and the different kinds of Aida that are out there. So I have two different test strips that I made for myself for the different kinds of Aida. So this one here is 11C and this one is 14C. And so what that means is there are different counts in Aida. There are more than just 11 and 14, but those are the two common ones that I use. And so what that means is there are 11 squares per inch in an 11 count Aida. So these are the squares here, the individual squares of Aida. And there are 11 per inch in 11 count and 14 per inch in 14 count. And so the difference in those, it will mean that the end project will have a different size. And it can also mean that you will need a different number of strands for embroidery thread and a different sized needle. So I made these testers specifically for personal use because I like to, I think they help me visualize how many threads and how big the project will be per the different sizes. So starting with this 11 count tester here, as you can see, I did a 3x3 grid on each different ones. And so I have a 6-strand, a 3-strand, and a size 8 pearled cotton. Pearled cotton is a different type of thread than a regular embroidery thread, and I just did that as a tester for myself. So what I mean by the different strands in embroidery thread, so as you can see here, this is a piece that, hold on. So as you can see here, this piece of embroidery thread is the standard 6-strand embroidery. And so what that means is if you were to pull this apart a little bit, you can see that there are 6 individual strands of embroidery thread here, 3 on this side and 3 over here. And so if you were to take this thread directly off this spool and use it, you would be using 6 strands, which is what the top one here is. Underneath is a 3-strand embroidery. And so what that means is I took a piece of thread like this, separated out the strands, I cut it to length, and then I pulled apart the 3 different strands. That is similar to what this piece is here. This is a piece that I had been using. I separated out into those 3 strands, as you can see here. There's 3 strands here. And then that is what I used to cross stitch. I like the look of a 3-strand cross stitch a little bit better. I think you can see the X's a little bit more, which is what makes, I think, a cross stitch look good. I think the 6 is a little bulky, and it's also a little bit harder to use. One, because it's harder to get into the needle, and it's harder to get the needle through the Aida, especially when you're finishing out a square and you have gone through a specific hole several times. So I like the look of a 3-strand cross stitch on an 11 count. This here again is a different type of thread called pearled cotton. You don't separate it out, but a size 8 pearled cotton is pretty similar to a 2-strand embroidery thread. Here I have a 14 count Aida. Again, that means that there are 14 of these squares per inch. So that means that the squares themselves are a little bit smaller. Here I have a 6-strand, a 3-strand, a 2-strand, and that size 8 pearled cotton. As you can see, to me, this 6-strand is a little bulky, but if you're going for a more fuller look, you can use that. Here I have the 3-strand. Again, I typically use 3 strands. Then there's the 2-strand on the bottom. As you can see, it looks a little bit fuller here. If you're comparing the 3 to the 3 on the 14 to the 3 on the 11, or if you're comparing that pearled cotton on the bottom. Something else comparing the two together, the size of your finished product is going to be a little bit different. So as you can see, these are both 3x3 grids, but the overall size of the grid on the 11 count is bigger than the size on the 14 count. meaning that your finished project, even if you're using the same number of strands on the same pattern, it will be a little bit larger on the 11 count. So that's just something to know when you're planning out your project.